per se. That's something we're going to mention next half of the program. But would you agree with that? The actual, once you get into gangs, then the drugs sort of come along with that as well.
Yes, John Pitts from University of Bedfordshire, he's working with me on this current project. Now he, and I would agree with him totally, that the money earned from drugs on the streets keeps and draws young people into gangs. No two ways about it. The drug scene is massive, and the people in the older members of youth gangs are entrepreneurs, they are businessmen. Yeah, and we mustn't forget that, it's a business, and that draws in young people into that business.
Okay, all right, we've got to take a short break, but thanks to everyone for the input here in this first half of the program. Stay with us. After this short break, we're going to be talking about drugs in the second half of the program, so don't go away.
वक्त था वक्त मसीहा न किसी और का वक्त था वक्त मसीहा न किसी और का वक्त मैं ना आता तो कोई और ही आया होता मैं ना आता तो कोई और ही आया होता जिंदाबाद जिंदाबाद अहमदियत जिंदाबाद अहमदियत जिंदाबाद अहमदियत जिंदाबाद अहमदियत जिंदाबाद अहमदियत जिंदाबाद
Welcome back to the program. You're watching Real Talk. On today's show, we've been discussing gangs, and one element that is always associated with that is drugs and drug abuse, drug dealing as well. So that's what we're going to be discussing in this half of the program. And let's get the discussion going here in the studio. Roger, if I could turn to you first. Drugs have always been around, but it seems that in today's modern society, people are actually getting involved in drugs who wouldn't normally have used drugs earlier on. We find that people from more affluent backgrounds as well are getting involved in drugs. So why do you think that is actually happening?
I think we live in a society where drugs are easy to access. You know, you can go into most towns and cities in the UK and get drugs of most kind, most types, most classification. You're right, it's not new. And it's also a cultural thing that the whole notion of drinking alcohol, part of growing up is you drink alcohol for a whole number of young people. Now it's alcohol and or drugs, and or both at once.
Right.
But that's, I think, all the newer drugs which have been appearing over in recent years. This, the big sort of panic at the moment about methadone is another new sort of legal drug which is now becoming questionable.
Right.
Drugs are there; they're not going to go away. We have to decide as a society what we do about it.
Okay. Jason, why do you think there's actually a need for people to start experimenting with drugs? Why do they turn to that?
Why there's a need? It's down to maybe like peer pressure, you know. Drugs are more readily available. I think they've always been there, but I think they're a lot more available now. I think there's a...
So from your experience, I mean, you've worked with so many youngsters as well in your day-to-day work. Why do people turn to drugs?
A lot of it is experimenting. And then obviously developing a habit, and then it goes off from there.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Ian, would you agree with that? People just want to actually just start experimenting with it, and then it maybe leads on to other things.
Jason talked about peer pressure, and that I think mainly is why people go to drugs. The question quite often is which drug do they go to first? Is it cannabis, or is it something harder, a class A drug, heroin or cocaine? And the concern is that just because you start smoking cannabis, that isn't okay. Because where did that come from? Who was that bought from? And will that person then influence your decisions in going on to buying harder drugs later on?
Okay, all right. So, I mean, Roger, this sort of drug culture that we're talking about, where do you think actually originated from? Where did it come about from?
Probably through drinking alcohol. I mean, people forget that alcohol is a drug, and it kills more people than any other drug by far. And there are only limited restrictions on alcohol. You've got to be over 18 or thereabouts, but that doesn't work, of course. I think, you know, once you get into other drugs, non-alcohol drugs, is that they are here. It's an industry, it's a business. You can't close it down. There's issues where you legalise some drugs, you know, you decriminalise. Those issues have to be taken on board because there's always new and newer and newer legal drugs appearing, which you can buy off the internet or you can buy on the street. How you tackle it is a huge question, and as Ian was saying, it's down to personal decision making at the end of the day. You decide to buy some and to use it. Yeah,
we'll touch upon that a bit later on in the programme about how to deal with it. All right, let's go to the audience. I mean, a lot of you guys here, Aftab, if you got a point, I'd like to make some.
I just wanted to touch on sort of the reason why people get into it. I think that the media plays a role in that, and they glamorise a lot of the situations where drugs are being used. You take instances, for example, where so-and-so celebrity has been caught with drugs and they get let off, let off very easily, and that gives the impression to especially the youth that that's socially acceptable. And that role that the media plays, a lot of people take that for gospel, that the media is right and the media is telling us how to live our lives. And when the media starts telling us that it's socially acceptable, then people find no reason with that, and they find that as a justification why they can go ahead and start doing things like that, which actually may be wrong.
Okay, all right, that's a valid point. Let's get one more view as well. For the people who are here, you're at college, you're at school, universities, wherever, how do you actually find out that people are, maybe your friends are maybe involved in drugs as well, and how do people actually get involved in that whole culture, that whole scene?
First of all, I would just say that you can see the results. It could be a good student, and after a month, he could be a really bad student. He would start bunking school, not coming into lessons, or even come late in the morning, because this would be the results he had from the last night.
Okay. Any other views as well?
I think that when people just use drugs, it's just a way to socialise with each other. It's just an incentive. It's something they can do fun with each other, you know. It's like when people drink alcohol, they just drink it not safe for getting drunk, just something to do together.
It's become a social event, hasn't it?
It's just become a social event, that's all it's become.
Okay, all right. Ian, what advice can you give to young people who are maybe facing this situation? They feel that they're getting pressured into this.
The simple advice is don't do it. I mean, to pick up on a point which this gentleman here made, there's a term which is particularly used within the media of recreational drug use of controlled drugs. Well, there is no recreational use of drugs, there is unlawful use of drugs. It isn't recreational, it's criminal. And yes, you're right, there are several high-profile celebrities. It'd be obviously very wrong of me to name any of them here, but I'm sure we can all think of individuals who have been prosecuted and then appear on the television the following day, perhaps even presenting their own TV shows, and you think, well, where is the negative role model that says, no, that person has committed a criminal offence? It is important to reinforce it at the very highest levels, and that means through the media playing their part in a positive way to send that message that criminal use of drugs won't be tolerated. The other point, and again Jason picked up on, I hope he doesn't mind me using his analogy, having smoked cannabis at a party, and I'm sure people here perhaps know 13, 14-year-olds who've done that, you have to ask, where did that cannabis come from? You didn't just pop down to Boots and buy an eighth, you know, you just don't do it. That was dealt by a dealer who will have access to a number of friends who will persuade you, quite often by violence, to go buy some more. And once you're hooked, you're hooked.
Yeah, that's it. Roger, just turning to you, and we were talking about the criminal aspect of drugs, but also it affects people socially, it affects you mentally, it affects you physically. From your experiences, you've done research into different communities. What are the effects of drugs?
The effect of drugs, as some of our friends have hinted at, if you're a university student, for example, it's pretty easy to pick up drugs on campus, as it is in the streets, as it is anywhere, and I think the effects are all sort of obvious to see. I mean, you can walk down most high streets this day and age, and you can smell dope. Someone's having a puff somewhere. You know, it's going to affect your employment prospects, how you do a job, how you study, your relationships. Depends what sort of drugs you stay on. If it's simple cannabis puff, whatever, and then you develop into the harder stuff or the other stuff, that's going to affect you. You know, there's lots of evidence. So this current issue about methadone, meow meow, or different names. You know, it does lead to depression, a lot of medical side effects, not a health side effects, which are well and truly exposed in the media. That will not stop young people using it though. But, you know, that doesn't stop. I mean, it's again about education, isn't it? And as Ian's saying, end of the day, you make a choice yourself, irrespective of social peer group pressure. You have to decide. Otherwise you can't stop.
Yeah. I mean, Jason, from your experience, have you actually seen people who are potentially quite clever and could go far, but because of their drug abuse, they've actually, you know, their lifestyles maybe downhill from there?
Well, even myself as a young man, taking cannabis, because a lot of young people believe that cannabis is oh, it's not a drug, you know, because it's so regular, and they don't really see the major effects of drugs necessarily straight away.
Yeah.
But as Ian said, you just say no in the beginning, because I was a young man that had a lot of potential in school and left school with no GCSEs or anything due to the fact of smoking cannabis, just getting lazy, being forgetful, demotivated, and that's what cannabis does. You know, it's a depressant drug. It's not a drug that it helps you in any kind of way to motivate you. It keeps you down in the dumps, and you know, so that's a prime example.
That's looking at it on a personal level. How does that actually influence the people around you, maybe family or friends?
Well, it's going to have an influence. You're not motivated to do anything, you know. So, and mood swings and things like that. You know, you always forgetting things and stuff like that, not being able to communicate. So it's going to have effect on your loved ones and friends as well, and even people like you touched on doing your day-to-day job. You're smoking cannabis. You're not really motivated to do anything. Lazy, you know.
Okay, all right. I just want to move to the audience now. Have you actually seen people in your places of education, maybe workplaces, who have been involved in drugs, and how has that affected them? How has that actually changed their life, maybe? So, you've got a point.
I do agree with Jason. I think it is more of the peer pressure. It does affect people to go on to drugs. I think it's also the element of the background you come from. It starts from home. If you've got family issues or financial problems or any sort of stress, you're gonna want to go towards drugs to try and help you ease that sort of pain or whatever it is.
So you're saying that people use drugs as a way of sort of escaping the realities of their life?
Yeah.
Okay, but actually what we've seen at the moment now is that it's people from more sort of affluent, rich families, and potentially people from like decent schools, decent education. It's those sort of people right now that are actually turning to drugs. So, you know, why do you think that is?
I think, as he said as well, I think it's because of the social element, just to have an experiment it, and it becomes sort of like fun to do it.
Yeah.
And when they want to go out, they want to be on a high, or, you know what I mean, to just like a social element would be like a fun thing to do.
But this fun element, I just want to go on to that. Ian, just turning to you, some people look at sort of the lower class drugs as sort of soft drugs, and, you know, they're sort of recreational drugs. And actually, you know, the debate that's happening at the moment is that, you know, potentially they should be legalized. As a police officer, how would that affect you, and what's your sort of views on that?
Well, ultimately, any decision on classification of drugs is something for the Home Office to discuss. I think it's important to remember that controlled drugs, if you look at heroin, the street purity of heroin is infinitesimally low. Even
so it actually gets mixed with other chemicals?
It gets mixed with all sorts of rat poison, rubbish, absolute baking soda, a whole raft of stuff it gets mixed with. And even the so-called pure, recently imported stuff is only going to be about 65–70% pure. So at the outset, you've got a third of whatever you're taking, knowing it to be a controlled drug, is unknown. That's your best chance. By the time it gets down the food chain of dealers, the street dealers, you're looking at perhaps 20% purity, maybe even less than that. So the risks that you're taking are just huge.
Yeah. There's people saying if we legalise drugs, though, I mean, there's the lower class drugs, then potentially the quality of it would be better, therefore there'd be less health risk involved as well. And I mean, there's a whole campaign going for legalisation of drugs. So what would be the advantages of doing that?
I think that's something for the Ministry of Justice to discuss, really.